So we'll start our unit about Central America and South America with the geography of Central America and the Caribbean islands. And so these are two separate, we're going to put them together because it's kind of short, but these are two separate regions. Okay, one of them is Central America. Central America is this area between the two that's connected to both North America, as you can see Mexico's there, and South America, but that is called Central America. And then the Caribbean is all of the islands that are out here in the Caribbean Sea. So the Caribbean's the islands, Central America is the isthmus, this area, this narrow piece of land right here. So we need to talk about that word that I used on the last slide, isthmus, isthmus, isthmus. It's kind of a strange one to say, but an isthmus is a strip of land with water on both sides. So you can see this right here is an isthmus. Okay, it's a strip of land, narrow. It's got water on the right side, the Caribbean Sea, water on the left side, the Pacific Ocean, and it connects two larger bodies of land. So it connects North America to the north and South America to the south. And so a strip of land, narrow strip of land that has water on both sides and connects two big pieces of land. So it's almost like a land bridge or something like that. Now, like I said, Central America is an isthmus. It connects both North America and South America. And again, it separates the Pacific Ocean from the Atlantic Ocean. And the Caribbean Sea is kind of there between the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific. As you can see, the Caribbean Sea is right here, but then you just move past these islands and it's also called the Atlantic Ocean. So it's all connected. The other thing that divides what divides this isthmus is the Panama Canal. And the Panama Canal, if you look back up at that same map that I was marking up before, is this green line here. Okay, this green line goes through Panama, and it's a river, but it's a homemade river. It's a man-made river. It's something that we cut. We actually went down there and dug and cut through the land to connect the two oceans, so that we had a way to get through if we're heading from Europe to Asia or something like that. Okay, and so what this did is it made it so you don't have to go all the way down around South America. Instead, you can just cut through in Panama. Here are the 7 countries of Central America. You can see Belize is right there, followed by Guatemala, and then El Salvador is this little one over here. Honduras is right there. Nicaragua's next, big one right here. Costa Rica next, and then Panama is both of these pieces that are separated by the Panama Canal. And if we look at the other part, the Caribbean islands, then we're going to see that there are hundreds of islands out there. Okay, I've picked a pretty simple map so you can see the important ones that I want you to know. I want you to know about 4 countries and 1 territory of the United States. And those are the bigger islands. They're called the Greater Antilles. Okay, and the Greater Antilles include Cuba, and we'll call that number 1, right? And here it is, right here, this big long red island is Cuba. And then Haiti is the next island over, but it's the smaller half of this island. The whole island's called Hispaniola, but it's the smaller half of it. The larger half is number 3, the Dominican Republic. And then Puerto Rico is part of the United States, so it's not its own country, but it is its own island out here. And then number 5 is Jamaica, and Jamaica is right below Cuba here on the east side of Cuba. All right, and so those are the islands that you'll be responsible for knowing are the Greater Antilles, and those countries in particular. There's also the Lesser Antilles, which are over here, many islands. Some of them you probably have heard of, but I'm not going to make you learn each and every one of those, but it's a small chain of islands to the southeast of the Greater Antilles. So now we'll talk about some of the physical features in this region. There is a mountain range that runs right down the middle of that isthmus, right down the middle of Central America. It's called the Cordillera Central. There's a picture of it right here. Okay, the Cordillera Central, kind of even an extension going down from the Sierra Madre Mountains. And so the mountains kind of continue all the way down through North and South America. Another mountain that's important to know is Pico Duarte. Pico Duarte is the Caribbean's highest mountain, and it's found on the Dominican Republic, a pretty tall mountain out there. Last but not least, the largest lake in the area is in Nicaragua. It's pretty easy to see if you look on the map, but it is Lake Nicaragua, right? And it is sitting there right in the middle of Nicaragua. So if you look at it, you can see the mountains. It's kind of a really, really large lake, kind of almost the size of some of the smaller Great Lakes. Something there is a lot of in Central America and even the Caribbean as well is tectonic activity. And remember, those big tectonic plates that are under the ground are constantly moving around. And so because they're at the where two of the plates meet in Central America there, they have a lot of different issues, which is causing the land itself to be unstable. And in the region itself, there are more than 85 volcanoes in this small little region of the world. And one of them is the last one that had a big eruption was in 1997. It was called Soufriere Hills, and it's still active today. And so after that eruption, the mountain or the island that it was on, called Montserrat, is actually most of it is closed. About half of the entire island is closed, and all the people that had enough money moved away. And so more than half of the people moved away, and the people that were kind of stuck there were the poor people left on the other side of the island, just hoping that the eruptions don't get bigger and destroy and possibly kill them, destroy their homes, their buildings, all that kind of stuff. So there are lots of volcanoes, and earthquakes are very, very common. There was an earthquake in San Salvador, or there's been many earthquakes in San Salvador, which is the capital of El Salvador, and it's been destroyed and rebuilt many, many times. The last one was in 2001. There were about 100,000 homes that were destroyed, and so this this hit and losing your capital is hard for any nation to deal with, but it's really hard for a small, poor nation like El Salvador to deal with. Mudslides are the last thing. Mudslides are caused by earthquakes, and what happens is the side of the hill gets really wet, and you can see the picture right here. Okay, the side of the hill gets really, really wet. It's a steep hill, and so that soil gets soft. It doesn't hold on as much anymore. And if an earthquake happens, then that big old chunk of mud, that big chunk of land, can release off of the side of the hill and slide down into the city, destroying homes. It's like a flood, except for instead of water, it's mud, so it's much more dense. If you get stuck underwater, you might be able to swim your way to the top, but if you get stuck under mud, it's you end up suffocating and dying, you end up drowning in mud. So it's a bad deal, which can happen a lot because of the tectonic activity. And so now we're going to move on to the climate of the region. And the climate of the region is mostly wet and warm. So there's a lot of rain because it's very close to the ocean. There's more ocean than land around there. And then it's also very warm because it's right by the equator, right by 0 degrees latitude, where the most often the direct sunlight is in that region. It's between the tropics, remember, and the equator is kind of the middle. And so that's the warmest place on Earth, plus all that water adds for a whole lot of rain. And so the trade winds come in and they bring in the rain off of the water. The air fills up with water as the water evaporates off of the ocean, and then it gets over the land, it cools down, and it dumps that rain. And so one of the big ecosystems there is rainforest. There's many, many rainforests, and because of all this rain, it's also very good for tropical crops. And so the types of crops that they grow in this area are things like sugarcane and stuff, but also bananas and coffee are the two really major ones. Also, these trade winds not only bring rain, but they start to spin out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and they bring hurricanes as well. So they can also be very dangerous rains. The last thing that I want to talk about is the Central American Highlands, because it's a little bit different. It's up higher in the air, and so a lot of the rain doesn't get up there during the dry season. So from December to April, there's not enough rain for an actual rainforest to be there. And so it's really more grasslands, and it's really good for cattle ranching. So raising cows to be made into beef that we eat. And so, talking a little bit more about the ecosystems, rainforests are the major ones, and as they are being cut down, as they're being deforested, as we'll talk about, with really a problem all around the world, an environmental problem. As they cut down, the rain in the soil stays good as long as you don't try and farm it, and so it turns into a tropical grassland. So you have tropical grasses instead of trees. Costa Rica is interesting because it has a special ecosystem that's not found anywhere else in the entire world. It's only in that small little country of Costa Rica, and it's called a cloud forest. Okay, a cloud forest, it's just like a rainforest except for it's higher up in the mountains. And so as you go up in elevation, it gets cooler, and so that moist air turns into almost a fog all the time. So it's like rainforest that has fog down by the ground, constantly, consistently foggy. And so this is an interesting ecosystem because it allows for really diverse wildlife, things that can handle the heat and the moisture and stuff, but also things that need it a little bit cooler can live in that same ecosystem. Another ecosystem that you find, which is underwater, a little bit different ecosystem, and you can see a picture of it down here, is coral reef. Coral reef is made up of these tiny little organisms, and as they grow, which means that some of them are dying off, the ones that die off harden and they turn into this substance. It's kind of like limestone. It's kind of sharp, and it makes over time these really, really huge underwater islands of this coral reef. Okay, and so makes really big islands of it, and it's a really interesting thing because it makes shelter and space for all kinds of different ocean life to grow. And so you can see plants growing there and fish living there and sharks around there and every single type of ocean life that you can think of kind of fits really well in these coral reefs, especially the small ones. So one of the things that really hurts the economies of Central America and the Caribbean are those hurricanes because they cause damage, and that damage and the danger of the hurricanes keeps visitors away, it keeps people away, and they really need visitors to be there to help their economy. And so what is a hurricane? A hurricane is a really intense storm that forms over the Atlantic Ocean, and it starts to spin, and it becomes this gigantic superstorm almost. Okay, and generally, Central America and the Caribbean average about 8 hurricanes per year. So they're having them all the time. They're coming through during summer and early fall about 8 times per year. Some of them are not very strong. Some of them are extremely strong. Okay, but a hurricane can get up to 150 miles per hour winds. And if you think about that, that 150-mile-per-hour wind isn't probably going to hurt you if you're standing outside in it, but what hurts you is the things that that wind picks up and throws through the air, or it can pick you up and throw you through the air. And so entire towns are destroyed. Okay, and so that's kind of a really, really bad aspect of hurricanes. Okay, and what's happening is with global warming increasing, a lot of scientists are connecting that to the different weather that we've had, like the increased heat, obviously, but also the more powerful storms. And so we're having more hurricanes than ever before and stronger hurricanes than ever before due to global warming. And so what we end up needing is these countries need help to rebuild after these strong storms because they're poor. They don't have that kind of money, and it hurts people, and it destroys towns and damages roads and farms and schools and businesses, and it can really take a hit on that government, on the happiness of the people as well as the economy itself. So let's take a look at those economies and what kind of natural resources they have that they're working with. Because of their smaller sizes, these countries are pretty small. They have very few natural resources. And so as opposed to the country we've been talking about, which have been really, really big and had a lot of natural resources, now we're looking at much smaller countries. And so they do have some farming. They do have some good land. It's mostly farming that they make a lot of their money from, but it is coffee and sugar are the big ones. And we talked about bananas before as well, but the ones that make the most money are coffee and sugar. But the problem is those are cash crops to them. Those aren't things that they're eating. You can't live off of coffee and sugar. And so they have to sell that off and import most of their food that they eat. Okay, in some of the higher cool areas where it's too dry to farm those things, they also raise livestock, which means that they raise animals. They keep the animals alive and they farm them so that they can be later slaughtered and eaten as meat. Um, the other thing that they have a lot of in the region is mining, and this is particularly in Jamaica. They have a lot of bauxite, and this is a picture of bauxite right here. And bauxite's an interesting deal because even though it looks really weird and doesn't look like anything we know, they make aluminum out of bauxite. So aluminum is made from that substance, that reddish brownish rock. Another enormous part of the economy is tourism, and tourism is the business of providing food, places to stay, and other services to visitors who are coming on vacation from other places. And it's a very, very good vacation spot because the weather is so consistently nice. It's always so nice and sunny and warm, and people that have to deal with cold climates like to vacation there in the winters. And so it is the fastest growing part of the economy, and the two big areas are the Bahamas, which is a group of islands in the above the Greater Antilles, and then also Jamaica. And in Jamaica and the Bahamas, they have scuba diving, they have cruise ships, they have resorts, they have all kinds of different stuff. They have those coral reefs that you can scuba dive around and see tons of beautiful fish and things like that. They have hiking in the rainforests, okay? But the big problem with tourism, even though it's helping out their economy kind of, is most of the resorts and things like that are owned by countries or by businessmen in other countries. And so an American company might own a resort that's in Jamaica. And so the people who make the most money from it are the people from America. And how is it helping out the local economy? Well, the people that live there do get to work at the resorts, but you know, when you're just a housekeeper running the desk or doing something else, you're not getting paid very much to do that work. And so the low pay jobs are going to the people that live there, and the big money from these resorts goes away to other countries. And as usual, the last thing we'll examine is the environmental issues that come along with this region itself. And the environmental issues are the first one is water shortages. These islands that are surrounded by salt water don't have very much water that you can actually drink. And so, because you can't drink salt water, it'll make you sick. It'll, you know, you won't get any hydration out of it. And so, there are these water shortages because there's a small island with not that much water. Um, and, you know, there's enough water for maybe the people that live there, but when a bunch of people come and stay in a resort and use water to shower and drink and all that kind of stuff, then they can start to get shortages on these islands like the Bahamas and on these islands like Jamaica. So water shortages are a big problem. Another problem is pollution because the farmers, what happens, they have large scale farming there, so big farms, and these farms have nasty bugs on them because these bugs get to grow all year long. There's not an off season where they all die off and then come back afterwards. And so they have these big and exotic bugs and things like that, so they have to use bigger poisons to get rid of them. And so they use pesticides and chemicals to get rid of the weeds and the bugs that are threatening their crops. And that, of course, when it rains, runs off and goes into the water, and it starts to poison the water and poison the fish that are being eaten in the region. The last problem that really is a worldwide problem is deforestation. And deforestation ruins the land. Okay, very quickly after 2 or 3 years, it is completely useless land after you cut down the forest and then try to farm it, because all the nutrients go out of the soil. The trees are giving all the nutrients to the soil, and it's really good for a couple of years, but then with no trees, it doesn't stay good, right? And the country that's had the worst luck with it is Haiti. And if you remember, Haiti and the Dominican Republic are on that same island. They're on that Hispaniola island that I talked about before, and they're connected, but Dominican Republic has quite a bit of money, and Haiti's really, really poor. And so the big issue is Haiti has given up their forests. Okay, they have cut it down to try and make money, and they have basically no forest left. And so you can see this turning into a desert that has happened because of the cutting down the forests. And you can see it on this bottom picture here, and it's really, really interesting because this is a satellite image. It's a big image of the border between Haiti and the Dominican Republic. And so you can see right here, you can tell, you don't even need a line on it to see what the border between Haiti and the Dominican Republic is, because the Haiti side is completely desertified because the trees have all been taken, whereas Dominican Republic side is much more green and nice. Okay, and as you take this away, it takes away the ability to grow anything, but it also takes away the habitat where all these different species of animals and plants are living. And so you risk completely losing that diversity in the wildlife in that area.